what makes an 8th grade dropout sitting here sort of talking about his journey in education. It's been nothing if not that. It's been a real journey. You know, I think if you go back 40 years and told my father that 40 years from now I'd be speaking about education, he'd probably say, I told you didn't work hard enough on your damn tennis game, right? But I think the lack of education in my life, combined with the lack of choice, led to my disconnect in a life that seemed to be pretty successful, and a life that seemed to be pretty, glamorous. I really was as disconnected as you can possibly be. So as a result of that journey, I had to find my reason for playing the game, and that didn't probably happen until I was 27 years old. I had fallen from number 1 in the world to 140 in the world. I found myself at one of the lowest points in my life, ready to quit. And when I was confronted with that reality, should I quit or should I sort of start over, I really questioned what that means, starting over. And I knew for the first time that I had to really do it differently. I knew I had to find my reason. And coincidentally, at that intersection, I saw a show on 60 Minutes that was talking about KIPP, Knowledge is Power program, who had a number of charter schools, Mark Levin, Michael Feinstein. And I saw them rolling up their sleeves and affecting these children's lives truly systemically. When I saw that, I saw children that didn't have choice in their life, except they didn't have the luxury of being the best in the world at something. They unfortunately would continue this downward spiral of a life that they were trying to break out of. And overnight, literally, it seemed like I took on the Herculean task of building my own K through 12 public charter school in the most economically challenged area of Las Vegas. I took out a $40 million mortgage and figured out I'd have to pay for it one way or another. And I assure you, Ambien is no match for a $40 million mortgage, but we're the 5th largest school district in America, and my goal was kind of simple, was to give children choice through hope in education, but it was also to prove that we fail children, they don't fail us. We graduate 50th in the United States. In that journey, which probably took about 15 years, I learned a lot of things. I learned how hard it was to raise philanthropic dollars. I raised about $185 million of philanthropy. I learned how tough it was to be in the business of educating, because every day this is our future, and you can't take your eyes off the ball for a second. I also realized, which was pretty difficult, that I'm not an educator and I'm not an operator. I was a facilitator of this dream. But the hardest reality that hit me was I had 1,200 kids in the school, and I had over twice that on a waiting list to get in. So it was the children I couldn't help. And I come from a sport where you eat what you kill, right? And so I kind of looked at that as being twice the failure I was the success. And at that moment, I said, I need to figure out a way to scale this, and I couldn't. I don't know, sometimes things don't happen by accident, but that's when this beautiful, follically challenged gentleman came into my life. So we kind of, he called me, he read my book, he shared my passion and frustration with education, with the frustration of our public, trajectory, with the frustration of the scalability. He had a similar journey. We met to think out of the box and to figure out a way to really take on one of societal's most daunting issues. With his expertise and guidance, changed the trajectory of my life, and combined, we'll eventually talk about it, but it's been a step, one of the great transitions in my life, period, especially after tennis.
That's a pretty momentous change, right? So you just read his book and called him? I mean, what's that all about? How'd that go?
I actually went on to J-Date to find him. Is where I really found him, and I kept swiping. I'm not sure if it's left or right, but I did find him. It was, for me, my journey was a little different. It was a cold call.
It was a cold call.
Call.
But it was a warm reception.
Yes.
First thing he said to me was, no, this is a warm call. This is not a cold call. Yeah. So,
I mean, for me, the vast majority of my career, I was a capitalist, and I was a philanthropist as well, but I struggled at both. And as a capitalist, I struggled almost with a moral discomfort that came from being in an industry where the sole metric of success was making money. In the 1980s, I worked for a gentleman by the name of Michael Milken at a firm called Drexel, Burnham Lambert. When Drexel failed, myself and a group of others founded a firm called Canyon Partners, which we grew into about $25 billion. And all along, as I was creating wealth, which I always assumed would lead to happiness, I very quickly realized that there was very little correlation between wealth and happiness. That for me, the only thing that wealth could guarantee me was a more comfortable form of misery. Now, for the record, if you're going to be miserable, you might as well be comfortable. So that worked out nicely. So maybe in my desire to get balance or by redemption, my wife and I became philanthropists. And we struggled there too. And we didn't have the moral discomfort that came from making money off of other people's misfortunes, but rather we had an emotional discomfort that came from throwing money at other people's misfortunes. Because the vast number of organizations that we were funding really were just putting Band-Aids on issues. They were treating, being reactive, and in many instances, we were funding legacies of dependency. And what I realized very quickly that...
Wait, can you just stop there? What's legacy of dependency? What does that mean?
Well, it's not empowering people to tackle their own problems themselves. It's throwing money at an issue. And what we realize is that if you want to treat an issue or a problem in society, then the government and philanthropy are just fine. But if you want to really cure, you have to create sustainable, scalable solutions that stick, and that means making a profit. I mean, it's no secret that we as a country suffer from some daunting challenges, be it education, healthcare, housing. And our reliance upon the government and or philanthropy have actually handicapped our outcomes. So my mission is how do I take my emotional discomfort with my moral discomfort and create a business model that could do good and do well. As a philanthropist, I had built 38 public charter schools in Los Angeles for 15,000 school seats, and similar to Andre, I had this horrible frustration. While we had built 15,000 school seats over 7 years, there was 38,000 kids on the wait list, so we were over 2 times the failure. Very frustrated, and when you most need philanthropy is when it's least available. Back when the Great Recession hit, we were out of money in our philanthropy. I went back to our partners in philanthropy, and they were on to other businesses, other philanthropic endeavors. And I had just read Andre's book, and I said, here's a man who shares the same passion, same frustration, and if I can convince him to join me in harnessing market forces to tackle an issue as important as education, we could actually make a difference in the world. And I remember calling you originally. Andre was very hesitant and very skeptical, because I was asking him to make money off of the very issue and the very passion in philanthropy that he cared most about. I would say that we dated for 6 months.
Yeah, we held hands for the first 3, and then then we started to get a little closer. But but the truth is, I had to make that leap, and I went through so many, filters. Is this really something I want to do? And my wife, who is, the best thing that's ever happened in my life, truly, she's always been such a good judge of decisions. And she asked me a question I'll never forget that got me to make the leap. She said to me, you've been going back and forth on this for so long. She goes, what is the alternative? And I said, wow, you're right. The alternative of me not doing this means we don't build 34,000 seats with this first fund. It means we don't impact, all these communities throughout the United States. It means we don't maybe even redefine how we go about solving some of these issues. And when I answered that question, that's when I said, you know what, I'm ready to do this.
She's a wise woman, sounds like. Well, you guys are talking about a lot of things here. I want to bring this to life for a second, because you're talking about your fund, which is today supporting how many kids? 42,000?
Yeah, so over the last 4 years, we've raised actually $500 million of private equity capital. With that, we've built 79 schools for 42,000 kids in some of the most economically challenged neighborhoods of America.
So that's a pretty awesome accomplishment. But I want to bring this, I believe in showing, not just telling. So I pulled some pictures. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I want you to break down a little bit about what you do. Can you guys see this as a Mervyn's, right? It's great. So this used to be a Mervyn's, and now look what it is. Can you guys tell us a little bit about what's going, the school? This is where?
This is in South Dallas.
And look at this. There's Andre. Andre, are you teaching a class here?
I'm wearing the same shoes.
Shoes, yeah. And then we've got this. I mean, I saw that picture. I was like, that's what you guys do, right? Well, hopefully it's tears of joy. But she saw you and she said, Andre, those shoes are not good.
She was actually wearing the same shoes as Andre and was so upset that he was getting the credit for the shoes.
Yeah. So this school is exactly the kind of thing that you guys are doing, but at a bigger scale. And it's something that's a very big challenge to be able to accomplish and do this on a regular basis, right? So what's the goal for the next year? Like, what's the plan?
Well, what I can say emphatically is I spent 21 years as a professional tennis player, and I was always working backwards from goals. You kind of have your plan, and you kind of work your plan your work your plan, and it's always to peak, it's always to accomplish something that is very tangible, that requires all of you. One of the great things about post-tennis is that you don't have to work backwards, you work forwards. And you don't have to limit yourself by winning. You don't have to limit yourself by a certain number. So for me, it's about more, and it's about not allowing goals to actually limit you anymore. And that's what they feel like they're doing. The second we set a goal, we just blow right through it. We stop setting goals. It's about doing more. We'll do more in the next 3 years than we've done in the last 3 years. I don't like talking about what we haven't done. I like talking about what we have done. But the truth is we're continuing this. So working forward is such a beautiful way to live in life, and you wake up with anticipation every day. Where this leads, it leads to more good stuff.
So good is the new cool, kind of.
Yeah.
So let's talk about social impact investing, because it's one of those. It's a little bit controversial. It's kind of the idea is philanthropy broken? Because I remember I was at one of your events in Vegas, and oh my God, you worked that event harder than any tennis match. You were running around like a maniac to meet your fundraising goal. That was exhausting. So that switch to doing it like this is, it might make it a little bit easier for you. But Bobby, can you at least explain what social impact investing is? Break it down so we understand what the mechanics are.
Well, I guess starting with what it's not.
I can break it down too, but I want you to break it down.
Or you could break it down.
No, I want Bobby to break it down.
Isn't that a cue to music, if you're going to break it down? Let's start with what it's not. Social impact is not philanthropy, and it's not government. Social impact is an investment strategy that quite simply recognizes that doing good and doing well needn't be exclusive, right? Who says that they've got to segregate, or anyone has to segregate as an investor or as a philanthropist, profits and purpose? So social impact investing recognizes that doing good and doing well can actually play nicely in the sandbox. The vast majority of pushback that we've gotten when we go out and meet investors is there is this natural tendency for an investor, a capitalist, to assume that when you superimpose a societal return on a financial metric, you will sacrifice yield, which is not the case. I'm in the position of having been in the social impact business now for 20 years, and I can refute that. The reality is social impact investing can actually drive better returns than more traditional speculators. Think about it. There's 4 ways to create wealth in life. Number 1 is you can inherit it, which Andre and I failed at miserably. You can marry it. And needless to say, we both married up. There's no doubt about it, but we didn't marry rich. Number 3, you...
Well, speak for yourself.
Okay.
Number 3, you can speculate, which is what the vast majority of investors do. They're speculating on buying high, selling low, buying high, whatever it might be. But in my career, I've yet to find anyone who can consistently speculate well. Social impact investing is in the 4th form, which is value investing. And value investing is not as glamorous as the first 3, but what it requires you to do is to scour the market of opportunities, looking for marketplaces that are overlooked, misperceived, difficult to underwrite, and require unique skills to identify, quantify, and mitigate risk. That's what social impact is we're not focusing or trying to create demand. Andre and I have recognized that there's 1.2 million kids today on a wait list for a great charter school. At $20,000 a school seat, that's a $22 billion infrastructure opportunity. It's well above and beyond any philanthropist's capacity to tackle that issue. So doing good and doing well needn't be segregated. That's what social impact is. It doesn't come at a sacrifice in yield, and what we tell most investors is that we can actually drive better risk-adjusted returns because there's no correlation between are returns in the broader market indices. Think about this. You can invest in a real estate fund that's going to invest in high-end condos. And in a bull market, that fund will do incredibly well, because leverage is a competency, bad underwriting is forgiven, and a rising tide will lift all ships. What happens to the demand for those high-end condos when the Dow Jones collapses in half? It's going to disappear. What happens to the demand for charter school seats when the Dow Jones collapses? Or unemployment increases, or inflation increases? Absolutely nothing. So what I'd like to say is social impact will underperform in bull markets and wildly outperform in bear markets.
So to give you an idea of how it works, if you really look at it, I mean, you're talking about a charter school can't access public dollars to build their facility, but once they have their charter, the money from the state follows the child to your school, right? So you're almost relieving the public overcrowding that's happening as well. But on top of that, the money that follows that child to your school is a direct revenue stream on day one. So if you can bring private capital to the table, go to a great operator who wants to expand in a place where there's a huge demand and need for high quality educational seats, and you build a facility, a $10 million facility, and they have 800 kids, and they're in a state that allows 10,000 per child to follow that child, that's $8 million of revenue. Well, guess what? There's a business deal to be had there, because if we can bring that capital to the table, then use the tax-exempt bond market to refinance you out of it, where you have ownership over your whole school. These schools run sustainably in perpetuity, and by the way, we've satisfied a like-minded investor, right? So we have investors that are saying, okay, we're not looking to get huge returns, but the truth is we're kind of either tired of giving away our money, we don't want to give away our money, we don't feel like it's the right thing to do in a scalable sense, but we still want to have huge societal impact. And so we ran into a lot of different kinds of investors along the way that were very fascinating, and I'll let Bobby do the honors of kind of talking about that journey if he wants.
Yeah, but you have a good story. So pretend I'm an investor. Like,
I have a lot of good stories.
I know you have so many good stories, but tell me, like, so if there's an investor, like, how does that usually go? How do you convince them if they're all about?
Recognize that, we came across 4 kinds of investors
when
we went out to raise the fund. And the first would be the capitalist. And, having been in the hedge fund business for 25 years, I had great access to capitalists. Some of my biggest investors, what we would call, were the unions, the pension funds. Imagine the conversation that I had with the state of California public pension fund, teachers fund, CalSTRS. I would call the head of the real estate division at CalSTRS, and I would say to this gentleman, I'd say, I have an amazing fund, we'd like you to invest. And he asked me, how big is the fund? I said, $200 million. He said, I'd take half the fund. And he goes, what's the asset class? And I said, well, hang on a second, let me tell you about the fundamentals of this industry. This industry is about the future of America. It's funded by the government. There's a huge mismatch. He goes, Bobby, you've been a great manager for me for 20 years. I'll take half the fund. What's the asset class? I said, are you sure you're going to take half the fund? He goes, I'm taking half the fund. This is the unionist. And he goes, what's the asset class? I said, do you swear? He goes, I swear. I go, pinky swear. He goes, I pinky swear. What's the asset class? I go, charter schools. He goes, fuck you. I'm like, fuck me, why? He goes, Bobby, charter schools are the nemesis of the public school district. So therefore, what you're doing is undermining the teachers' union. To which I said, oh no, we're incredibly pro-union. It's just the children's union that we're representing. And as long as education is going to be about adults, we're in trouble. So the unionists didn't work out so well.
Capitalists.
The capitalists.
No, the capitalists didn't work.
The unionists. I screwed up.
Sorry, you did.
You made me nervous.
Oh, sorry.
So the unionists didn't work. The next group was the capitalists. And the capitalists were those who absolutely could not comprehend that doing good and doing well could play nicely in the sandbox. People like George Soros, one of the greatest philanthropists and greatest capitalists in the world, believed that you had to segregate, make money, then give it away. And it was very difficult for us to educate those capitalists on the symbiotic relationships between profits and purpose. So unionists not so good, capitalists not so good. The communists were the third group. And
these guys are awesome.
Andre and I met with one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, CIC, China Investment Corporation. And at the end of our presentation, the gentleman from China leaned into the table and said, Mr. Agassi and Mr. Turner, actually I embellished, he only said Mr. Agassi, welcome to my life. And he says, Mr. Agassi, we'll take the entire fund. And Andre leans in. And I knew we were in trouble And Andre leans in, he's going to ask a question, but let me tell you why I know we're in trouble. Because Andre is one of the most curious human beings you'll ever meet. When I first met Andre, maybe 6 weeks into our relationship, I get a call on a Sunday morning to our house. And I'm laying in bed with my wife, Lauren, and he says, Bobby, I need your help with math. To which I said, that's fantastic. I need help with my backhand. To which Andre responded,
There's no helping your backhand.
Yeah. I think the quote was, I've seen your backhand, I don't need that much help with math. And I said, well, what's the problem with math? He goes, my son Jaden, who was 10 or maybe 10 at the time, has a math test on Monday on multiplication. And I cannot figure out how to explain to Jaden in what world a -3 times a -3 can be a +9.
I mean, think about that, right? You got three shitty things that happen to you, and then you multiply that shit by 3 times the shit. You're swimming in shit. This is bad.
So, fair enough. And I had the exact right answer. Ask my wife. So I rolled over in bed and I said, Lauren, who's sitting here today, and I said, help me explain to Andre how a -3 times a -3 can be a +9. She goes, explain to Andre the following. When you do a bad thing to a bad person, that's a good thing. Fair enough. Smart lady. So I rolled back, said, Andre, let me make it simple for you. If you do a bad thing, he goes, I heard your wife. But what does that have to do with -3 times -3? To which I responded, I don't know. I actually don't know why -3. Here I am, the Wharton grad, -3 times -3. I don't have a fucking clue
You
why
told
it's a
me to
positive
just
9.
memorize it, is
I
what you
said
did.
to you, it's one of those rules in math you just have to memorize. And he said to me, wow, maybe you can live your life that way, but I can't. And I'm like, okay, 8th grade dropout. And now we are with the government of China who's just said they'll take the entire fund, and Andre leans in. I'm like, oh shit, there goes the money. And he says to the gentleman from China, he goes, I'm flattered, I'm humbled, I'm honored, but explain to me why the government of China wants to invest in a private equity fund in America focused on real estate. To which the gentleman from China looked at us, Andre,
Focus on education,
and
not
said,
real estate.
Mr. Agassi, it might come as a surprise to you, but your country is indebted to my country to the tune of nearly $2 trillion. And none of us here today at this table will be alive to see that debt repaid. Therefore, we, the government of China, have got to invest in the next generation of Americans so that you can grow your economy out of the debt you owe us, and you are failing miserably.
Ouch.
Right?
Ouch.
To which Andre said, we don't want that money, do we? To which I said, no, but if we can't raise it elsewhere, you are jumping on the airplane and playing every exhibition match necessary to get it back. So again, the unionists not so good, the capitalists not so good, the communists definitely not good, but eye-opening, because why is it the government of China recognizes the need to invest in generational...
You have a generational investor, and then you have the short-term thought investors, and we just never could understand why we couldn't find
those investors.
The next
So
category.
we were lucky in the sense that, well, again, the unionists, the capitalists, and the communists didn't come to the rescue. We found the realists. And the realists were those when, and Andre referenced this before, when asked the question, what are the consequences of you not investing in a fund that's going to invest in education, the future of America? If the answer is it's unconscionable, it's disheartening, you became an investor. And they came in 2 forms, what I would call the evolved capitalist. And the evolved capitalist was someone who recognized that doing good and doing well needn't be segregated. The University of Michigan, by one example. Prudential Insurance, Citibank. These are profit-driven organizations who are less interested in the social impact we have, but were educated to recognize that by investing in these social injustices, you can drive better risk-adjusted returns. The other group was the enlightened philanthropists, folks like the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, who had realized that over the last 100 years, they'd given $1 billion away of capital and grants and realized that the vast majority of their impact had been, again, building legacies of dependency. And Stephen Hines, who's the president of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, realized that when and where there is a sustainable for-profit solution that also tackles the mission of the organization, it behooves them to invest. Why invest in a hedge fund that invests in long-short commodities, or why invest in a real estate fund that's doing high-end condos when you can invest with Andre and Bobby that's going to drive a great return and tackle the same mission?
So think about this from this perspective. I raised $185 million in philanthropic dollars in order for one school that has 1,200 children to live in perpetuity. We were having our first investor meeting, and we were having it at my school, and I'm looking around as we're going over all these numbers, and I'm looking around at this school, and I started to calculate what I've put into this school, and I quickly got up already to 100 million. But let's just say that 185 million that I raised in philanthropic dollars, I could sort of go back in time or fast forward and give to what we're doing now. That 185 million not only will build 20,000 school seats instead of 1,200, it not only will live in perpetuity, but that same 185 million, about maybe 200 and I'll get numbers a little wrong because I need to concentrate on it, $250 million back. So my 185 is going to be now 250, plus I can go do more. So all of a sudden it just hit me in one moment, that transition and how important it is to understand that form of scalability and sustainability.
Did you tell your wife that she was right?
I tell her that every day.
Smart man.
About everything.
Smart man.
And Jamie, think about it. People in this country, I think, listen, we all recognize there's daunting challenges. But I sit here as an optimist, as does Andre, because daunting challenges actually prevent generational investment opportunities. And I think it's important to recognize that there's a misperception of the problems we face as a society. I think that if we could all raise our hands, one of the biggest, if not the biggest problem most people believe is the disparity of wealth in this country. That when 1% of a country controls 99% of its wealth, you undermine the very fabric of a healthy society. Raise your hand if you believe that. Yeah. Okay? I disagree. Okay, and I appreciate the applaud, but the reality is disparity of wealth is a problem, but disparity of hope is a bigger problem. Because this country is built on disparity of wealth. This is not the United Socialist States of America. This is a capitalist society, and you need disparity of wealth. It's more extreme than it's ever been, but what we're suffering from is the disparity of hope. Because I grew up the 99%. You grew up the 99%, you did. But we always believed in the feasibility of the American dream. We believed that with a great education, with hard work, with affordable housing for our parents, with access to preventative health care, and a little bit of luck, we could become the 1%. And when there's hope in a community, you actually are encouraged. What we have today is we have tens and tens of millions of families in this country who don't believe in the feasibility of the American dream. They actually believe that there is not a level and fair playing field. They have been foreclosed out of the American dream. When you're growing up a single African-American woman in East Baltimore, and you're not working one job, you're working two jobs, maybe three jobs. You're coming home, you're spending 60 or 70% of your income on rent at the expense of food security, health security, retirement. Your children are relegated to a public school where the likelihood of your son graduating high school is below 40%, graduating college below 2%, going to jail by the age 40 greater than 50%. Where is there hope in that family? And when you remove hope from the equation, what fills that void is despair. And intensive despair is what I believe leads to the intensive violence. It also leads to the political circuses that we see today. A vote for Donald Trump, in my mind, was not a vote for hope. It was a vote in defiance of the existing system that had failed to tackle the issues that come from the injustices from social determination. Social impact investing is harnessing market forces to do what the government and philanthropists haven't done. It's investing for profit, but it's investing for positive societal change.
Okay, so this is a
Boom.
really... Right.
Boom. Boom.
Yes,
Boom.
So you're among friends here. This is a group of people who are well on their way to changing the world and making their own contribution to the society. Are you telling everybody in this room that they shouldn't give to philanthropy?
No, not at all. Philanthropy, this social impact doesn't put philanthropy out of business. In fact, philanthropy is alive and well. There's so many issues that cannot be treated with a sustainable for-profit solution.
Here's what social investing does. It makes philanthropy much more efficient. So philanthropy is an important part of our society. It's an important part of our culture. It's an important part of being a human being. I mean, the idea of caring and giving always needs to be at the forefront of everything we do. I can tell you right now, I have in my foundation, which is public, which is transparent, I sit over $100 million in the portfolio, and what I can tell you now is I can use that money to direct it into things that help facilitate the educational experience of these kids based on what we have been doing over in this. Don't get me wrong, there's a disconnect, but anybody that wants to give an education, we provide the engine that helps these people grow, where when you start to give a little bit, they can do multiples with it. So I think there's always a place for philanthropy, but they work together, it makes it more efficient.
They can complement each other. Again, we haven't figured out a way to make money off of teenage pregnancy, but it's an issue. We haven't figured out a way to make money off of childhood obesity, but that's an incredible issue. And we have 42,000 kids in the schools that we've built over the last 4 or 5 years. I would say that 85% of our students qualify for free and or reduced lunches and breakfasts, yet 85% of the 85% of kids are fat. Why? Because we serve them crap in school. Well, think of the intersection and the reinforcing mechanism that social impactful investing can have by enriching communities with hope. Andre and I built an amazing K-7 charter school in probably one of the most violent neighborhoods of Washington, D.C. Anyone from Washington, D.C.? Okay? So you know the Agassi area, Ward 8. It's a very violent neighborhood. And we built a school in probably one of the most economically challenged, densely populated, diverse communities in America.
LEED Platinum as well.
We built a LEED Platinum school for 700 kids. K-7 rocket ship academies out of San Jose. And right across the street from this school is the Woodland Terrace Public Housing Project, one of the most violent public housing projects in America. And in under 1 year of us opening the doors of our school, violent crimes fell by over 50% at Woodland Terrace. Now, is that because we built a school? Or maybe the local liquor store closed down? But I have to believe that a community that has been neglected of investment for the last 50 years, when all of a sudden someone is demonstrating and believing in the community, and we invested $50 million to build this school, all of a sudden the community looks around and says, we're worthy of an investment, we need to hold ourselves accountable for our actions and our behavior. And that's the reinforcing mechanism that social impact can have.
The same people responsible for the crime are the same people protecting the school. I mean, it's really what it boils down to. It gives people hope, and when you take away hope, as Bobby says, enter desperation. Desperation, you do desperate acts, and it all works together. So multiple ways communities benefit. And that old down Mervyn's that you showed earlier, I mean, these great educators, they don't get into education for fame or fortune. They get in because they want a learning-friendly environment to teach the future of our country. And if you can provide that for them, and what is a learning-friendly environment? We're all stealing best practices from each other. Everything I do at my school is stuff I've stolen. Everything that I've stolen, I give away. That's a great way to live. All you really need is an environment of accountability and culture and respect, and that's it. And that's a bunch of lights that you punch through. That's plumbing, and that's a little bit of technology. And these people who charter schools aren't the panacea answer to education. Matter of fact, most of them don't outperform, and I believe, and Bobby believes, that every school that doesn't outperform should go into a different business because you're too responsible for something that's too important. But the top 15% of great charter school operators by far and away outperform their district peers. These are the only people we partner with because we're not interested in scaling mediocrity. We want to scale success, and we're seeing it in multiple ways in these communities.
So that's accountability, right? So social impacting. How do you know if it's working? So you said it's Profit is one way to manage it. So you know it's working if you're making money. You know it's working if the people feel better. If a few years from now, how do we know that this concept of social impact is actually making an impact by doing good?
Well, I don't think that we have to worry about a few years from now because we have 20 years of evidence that it works. What we need to do is spread the gospel. For those of you who don't know me, I'm very fearful of public speaking. And I don't like crowds. So here I am in a crowd, publicly speaking. And the reason is because...
You're also a germaphobe.
I am a germaphobe.
Yeah.
Dirty laundry. Someone asked me, why are you and Andre so willing to talk about the business model? Aren't you afraid of competition? And my response is no, I'm afraid that there's not competition. The issues are so daunting. If you think about housing, there's 43 million renter households in America. 1 out of 2 is rent burdened, spending over 1/3 of their income on rent. 1 out of 4 is severely rent burdened, spending over 60% of their income on rent. When you think about healthcare, we're number 1 in the world in what we spend. We spend 18% of our GDP on healthcare, yet our outcomes are in the bottom quartile. These issues are so big, so daunting, that it's our job to get up on a bully pulpit and talk about the responsibility we all have. One of the things that made me fall in love with Andre, well, many things. Number 1 is is that, what makes Andre such a kind human being and such a soulful human being? And it's because he recognizes how much of a role that luck has played in his life. That luck has played in both of our lives. Yes, we're very fortunate when we talk about how you define success. But having the great fortune, I think, comes with a responsibility to pay it forward. And the more people that we can convince that doing good and doing well don't have to be more exclusive, the sooner we're going to be able to tackle some of the more daunting challenges that we face as a society.
So you've got these people all frothy and excited. This is Summit, and people want to do something. What should we do? What should all these people do when they walk out of here? How can they change their approach? What's the recommendation?
Well, listen, number 1 is if you have the financial wherewithal, think about diversifying your portfolio and making sure that the investments you make are being accountable and practicing and employing socially responsible practices. But not everyone can be an investor, a social impact investor, but you can be an advocate for change. You can be an advocate for change wherever you work. Make sure that whatever company you work for thinks out of the box. Doing good is good for enterprise value. Think about CVS drugstores. Who shops at a CVS drugstore? Do the math. 2 years ago, the chairman of CVS drugstore stopped selling tobacco in their pharmacy. Now, as a traditional hedge fund investor, I'd say, God, that's a horrible idea. $100 billion in sales, $2 billion in tobacco, so only 2%. But the profit margins on tobacco were 20%, so $200 million. They traded a market cap of 20 times. It's $4 billion of market cap that just would have disappeared overnight. So when he announced that, a traditional investor would sell short that stock. But what happened was the market rewarded him, because here is a chairman or a president of a company who is taking ownership for employing socially responsible practices. How can you in the healthcare industry sell cigarettes if you're in the healthcare industry? And what happened is the market rewarded. I remember my wife and daughter came home that afternoon and said, Dad, well, one of them said, Dad, did you see what CVS did today? And I said, I did. And they both said, we've got to support CVS. So number 1 is when you make investments or wherever you work, make sure that you preach that employing social responsibility, social practices are important to our revenues and to our enterprise value, number 1. Number 2, the greatest form of activism you all have in this room is voting with what? Voting with your pocketbooks. Supporting brands that employ social responsible practices and rejecting brands that don't. So everyone here can walk out saying, okay, if you're wealthy, think about allocating a portion of your portfolio to socially impactful. But wherever you work, everyone has a job. Make sure that with whomever you're working, that you're thinking in the forethought of your thoughts that we need to be a socially responsible organization. And number 3, vote with your wallets. Support brands that are employing socially responsible practices and reject brands that don't.
This is incredible. Andre, do you want to close out this session and leave people with a final thought?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think all these thoughts are good. I mean, first of all, congratulations to all of you in this room right now, because you're not here by accident. You know, you're here for a reason, and this is where it all starts. It starts by meeting one another. It starts by thinking out loud. It starts by dreaming out loud, and having your backbone be as strong as your wishbone. You know, we all can sit here and dream, but make it more than that. Get out there and like Bobby said, on how to do it, there are some tools. Come up with your own ways, but don't be scared to show that you're strong enough to go after those dreams. And you know, you're what we count on. So thanks for making it important to you.
Hear, hear. Thank you, guys. So thanks for being here. Thank you for sharing.